Hello and welcome to the romance track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about shifters and creatures and vampires and love. But before we do all of that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Jeanne.
Oh, I just muted myself and you made me unmute. Hi, I'm Jeanne Adams. I write urban fantasy, paranormal romantic suspense, and space adventure with my friend Nancy Northcott. And I like romance.
Very good. Deb.
Hey, I'm Deb Marlowe. I write historical romance and also historical mysteries, Victorian set, slow burn romance, Victorian mysteries. And I have a paranormal series with Pixies, but I also am part of a new set coming this month. Coming later this month. That's a Regency series about a witches' ball, and it's about a witches society that exists within Regency society. So super excited about that. This is my first witch, so it was really fun. I had a lot of fun with it, and I think I'm going to turn it into a series. So
that
sounds awesome.
Gini.
Hi, I'm Ginny Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Doll Books. I also write under a variety of pen names and all lengths and genres, including genres and lengths with all kinds of undeads, and they're usually finding romance in some way because I like it.
Susan.
Hi, I am Susan Griffith. I am the one half of the writing team of Clay and Susan Griffiths. We write historical fantasies, which include the Vampire Empire series from Pyre and the Crowning Key series from, oh my God, I'm blanking. Oh, God almighty. I will think of it in a minute. But they have werewolves and all kinds of stuff, and we love playing with the monsters in our series. So.
All right.
I am Cecilia Dominic. I'm a USA Today bestselling author. I write urban fantasy with a lot of werewolves and fae, and I have one vampire hero, and I also write steampunk, and you'll probably be seeing my supervisor, Timothy Mouse, hop up and down and in and out of screen.
Meghan.
Hi, I'm Meghan Maslow, and I also am a big romance lover, but I like to flavor that with fantasy, urban fantasy, and paranormal. I like to say that I write mischief, magic, and murder because usually there's got to be, a dead body in my romances. I swear it has a happily ever after, but got to have some fun in there. And I also tend to put a lot of comedy in my fantasy. Big Robert Aspirin fan, so that's sort of where my inspiration originally started. I have tons of shifters, and I have vampires, I have dragons, I have, you name it, it's in there. And it's usually with a little bit of a twist on the genre.
And I'm Gail C. Martin and Morgan Brice. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. And I've definitely got ghosts, psychics, mediums, shifters, all kinds of things. So, and what I don't write, I love to read. So this is definitely, we're going to have fun tonight. So let's talk about what's so great about creatures, shifters, non-humans falling in love. Jeanne?
Oh my gosh, everything. you get to add, as a writer, you get to add a layer of complexity to everything in the story, which is, what we want to do as writers is put them into situations that make them express their real feelings, whether they want to or not. And being a shifter or being a witch, which is mostly in my series, use witches and things of that nature, it adds a layer of complexity and vulnerability that you don't get in just a regular, contemporary romance. You have a willingness or an unwillingness to be vulnerable about who you really are in some of them. And I just find that so much fun to explore and play with. Who knows, who doesn't know, who's accepting, who's not, reluctantly accepting, not reluctantly accepting. It just adds a great spice to the mix of a great romance or a great romantic suspense.
Okay. Deb?
I totally agree with all you said. I love I love the spice. I love the layers. I love that you often get a sense of community with the paranormal element. So whether it's pixies or witches or shifters, I love that there's like a community within a community, and I think that's always really fun to explore. And plus, you can just let loose. I mean, whatever you can dream up, you can make happen. So I love that. I in my other two genres, I have to stick to, close to what really happened. And I love that. I love research. I love history, but I also love doing these projects to just let me go, boom, I can do something really fun and interesting. So.
Very good. Ginny.
Well, I agree with what Jeannie and Deb said, but I based on being basically a very big cross-genre author, I don't worry about what I'm supposed to do because I'm already not supposed to be doing what I'm doing.
Same.
So I'm just like, I'm gonna do what I want. I
Break all the rules, Jenny. Go ahead.
yeah, exactly. I do what I want. I'm a cat. So, basically, I look at it as I have action and romance and humor and mystery and everything I write, regardless of the genre. So I just enjoy doing things with paranormal I'm trying to do something a little bit unexpected, which is hard to do because we're all doing that and everybody's writing great and everybody's got great ideas. But I like to mix it up just a little bit and hopefully take you where you're not expecting. But I think that's part of the fun of the not expecting, is this person, the devil's daughter? Is this person, actually a vampire? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because it can be both or neither. And I just enjoy doing it like that. So I agree. I just think it gives me more crayons in the big crayon box. I wanted the 96 crayon box and then some, and this adds more crayons.
With the cool sharpener in the back.
That's right. Exactly.
Susan.
It's strange because I love the danger element that always kind of comes with it. There's always that sense that, a vampire could just go crazy all of a sudden and just ravage you or beat you or bite you or whatever. And the same thing with werewolves or any kind of shifter that you've got going on. There's that element of danger that you probably shouldn't be doing this, but you're going to anyway because, well, they're just hot, or there's just some things they're being thrown together for some bizarre reason. And it's that, should I, shouldn't I? And oh my God, he's got a whole family of vampires out there. Do I really want to get involved with that family? And so there's just a lot more, like you said, complexity, but there's also that element of danger, that darkness that, like in my stuff, vampires really aren't that nice. And it's a big commitment to have to like this person and like this vampire. And I love those layers of complexity that kind of gives you that chill. I was never a horror buff, but my husband is. And so he brought me into the world of horror, but I was a big classic monster fan. So to me, playing with these classic archetypes and dealing with that little bit of darkness and danger was very exhilarating. And I think a lot of people find that too.
Okay. Cecilia.
Oh yeah, and to totally build on that, I forgot to mention in my intro that I'm also a psychologist in my day job. And I got fascinated when I was working on the lycanthropy files on the scientific or potential scientific and genetic components of lycanthropy. And so that's how I mashed them together. And I actually do have one review that says, wow, I had no idea they were studying this. This is awesome. And I was like, it's fiction, but thanks. Glad the science was that convincing. But yeah, it's playing with if they're in wolf form and they shift back to human form, does their brain shift at the same rate? And, the ones who were born werewolves, they're brought up in their culture so they know how to control that better than the ones who are surprised, whoops, we don't know why we're turning into werewolves. And then with the Fae files, which, I count Fae as paranormal creatures as well, even though I realize it's a whole separate panel, but she is The heroine has been exiled in the earth realm for several hundred years. And so she's having to balance out that identity, like how fae am I and how human am I? And that's always the question for our creatures, right? It's like, how much of this am I and how much of that am I? And one of the great things about the horror genre, which we all kind of poke at with what we do, is not like that. Speaking of creatures, let me just bite you tonight. One of the great things about being so horror adjacent is that we can poke at that. Okay, who's the real monster here? Is it the monster, or is it the humans who are acting like monsters? And that's a fun line to draw.
Okay, Meghan.
Well, mostly I think it's been said. In fact, I was going to pick up on Celia's comment, because I like when you do monsters or, you know, any sort of paranormal, it tells you something about humanity too, and the world that you then build around it. And you know, I really enjoy that part of it. I also enjoy the unexpected elements where, you know, there's just things that if you read it in a contemporary, you'd be like, well, that wouldn't happen, but you can come up with the craziest stuff, and you know, and you can throw it in there, and then you have, and for me, I'm a pantser, so I love to have something happen. Boom, you know, the dead body shows up, you know, something crazy goes on. Like I can't write the coffee shop, you know, everyone goes and they're having a date and it's so sweet. I have to have like some, you know, like a dragon crash through the window and dies on their table, right? And now they're involved in this something, right? It's so much fun to play with that way. But the other thing is, for me, is, and this kind of comes back to what it means to be human, but if I had to say that I have a theme of what I really write, it's misfits who find their fit. And in some ways, it's so funny that you would, you know, take creatures that aren't human, and because it's just such an easy demonstration of it, I think, in so many ways. And that's the thing. And it's, you know, they find their fit, whether that's within a human, another creature, you know, but it's something unexpected when they didn't think maybe they'd ever fit in. So I love that. That's like, you know, my jam.
And I love all of the things you've said. I think one of the other things I enjoy playing with is people who are out of their own time, whether they are a vampire who's lived for centuries, or a ghost who is still sentient but past their own time, or a shifter or a werewolf who has a longer than human lifespan. And you know, sometimes it takes humans into middle age to fully understand some things about themselves, or acknowledge things about themselves that have always been there that they didn't want to see or didn't know to look for. And I always wonder, well, what would you learn about yourself if you had a couple of more centuries, you know, to be in your skin? What would become clear when you've seen the world change so much about you, and you realize that many of the mores and the cultural things that you were taught are not eternal, that they change. And so how would that change how you see yourself, and what you see in yourself, and what you find attractive in other people? And so I love playing with that, because I think it just opens up a whole lot of opportunities for characters to get insights into themselves and insights into the world around them. Plus, I just love to sit down for dinner with somebody who's several hundred years old and ask them all my history book questions. I mean, that would be catnip. So I think that's one of the cool things, as well as, you know, when you're playing with things like witchcraft or psychic abilities, what would it be like to try to have a relationship with somebody who's psychic, you know, who actually could read your mind, or could read your emotions, or have that extra something special? I think that would add some new ripples to putting a relationship together. And so I love to put
conflict.
I love to put or maybe not conflict, if they actually did know what you were thinking, you know. So I love to kind of play with those things as well. And the sky's the limit if you're working with non-human protagonists. So what's the weirdest pairing you've ever, most unusual, most innovative pairing that you've ever come up with for your folks falling in love? Gini?
Oh my gosh, mine are so ordinary by comparison. I mean, it's really, believer non-believer is probably the most conflicted pairing I have. So in my urban fantasy, the heroine is actually sort of like a Texas Ranger, except for planet Earth. She's human, she's American, but she's working for a collective, a spatial collective. And so she doesn't believe in magic. She's pretty well grounded, and the hero in that story doesn't believe in aliens, and they're both wrong. So that's probably the most unusual pairing I have, is that belief conflict. But otherwise, I'm not quite as creative as y'all.
Please.
You've got plenty of witches.
Oh, I've got lots of witches.
Deb?
So I have mine in a historical context, and it's a little bit different because in my Pixie series, the Pixies are more the facilitators of the romance, and the humans are in the romantic element, and the Pixies are the mischief makers or the helpers along, or whatever their nature tends to be. But I like to base a lot of my magic on nature, and so in my new Witches series, which is called Moonsight Magic. Well, the first book in that's included in this Witches Ball series is it's their elements are in contention. So it's she's a water moon witch, and he is a Promethean, which is fire and air and light. So they have to find a way. So I don't, like I said, mine are all in a historical context. So I'm not doing a lot of shifter, vampire stuff yet, but that's where I'm going with mine so far.
Join us.
I know. Well, I love to read it all. I love all your stuff.
You're on mute, my dear.
Good evening. I'm just going to pause and tell everybody what I told our panelists in the beginning. I am chasing a brand new puppy. So if I sometimes am looking over my shoulder or disappear for a moment, it's because I'm chasing a brand new puppy. So back to the panel. Ginny.
It's an awfully adorable puppy. Let's
So cute.
so. Okay. I have a ghoul falling in love with a beautiful young maiden, and she falls back in love with him because she can see his soul, and his soul is pure. And the handsome man who is terrorizing her and has destroyed her family is evil, and she loves the ghoul because the ghoul came to help her, not to harm anybody. And so I would call that probably the biggest opposite set I've got. Everything, yeah, most of the others are you can understand it, including the vampire hunter falling in love with a vampire. But I'm going to say my ghoul falling in love with a maiden who loves him right back is probably it.
Okay, Susan.
I think most of the time we say pretty standard, but in the new book that I'm working on, which is a 1930s New York nightclub magic book, we do have a dryad who basically can change gender at will, but they also, because they're gender neutral, they turn into a tree occasionally, and there is a romantic element in there, and there's times when gotta love a tree. And I love that. I love
on things.
Exactly, but it works, and we're really toying with that in seeing what the future could hold for that couple, and they may or may not be a couple. We haven't decided, but there's certainly room to grow with that, and we're really enjoying the complexity of dealing with a character with such dynamic changes in them. So
Whole
that's
new
probably
meaning
my
to
favorite.
tree hugger.
Exactly.
I was thinking the same thing.
Tree hugger before tree huggers were popular.
Or don't make a wood joke. Don't make a wood joke.
Yeah. Cecilia.
I was trying to think through mine, because mine tend to be fairly straightforward: werewolf, or werewolf lizard, fey gargoyle. I would have to say probably it's the Dreamweavers and Truth Seekers series. So I have Audrey, who is a Dreamweaver, which means that she can lucid dream and actually affect what happens in the collective unconscious, which therefore affects what happens in the waking world. And Damien, who is a police officer with a fear of the supernatural because of childhood trauma. So that was an interesting one. And then the other one that came to mind were, speaking of people who are centuries out of their time, Morgan Le Fay, who is a bounty hunter for the Queen of Fairy and Web of Truth, which is the second book in that series, and Philippe, who is a newly fledged vampire and is so not good at it.
You mentioned lizard. Could we go back to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you just glossed over lizard.
No, not wizards, not lizards.
Oh, wizard.
Oh, wizard.
No, I don't write monster romance.
Yeah.
in that sense.
I do, yeah.
You opened a whole new door there.
Try it.
Okay, so yeah, I'll make a note of
Right?
that.
Idea,
As the girl
plot
who got a
fairies.
love connection to do. Yeah.
Okay, there's an anthology, Lizard Love.
Boom.
Seriously.
I'm in.
I've been-
How about you, Megan?
I think it's probably, so I have a character who is named Nico, who is the sweetest cinnamon roll of an incubus, 7 foot tall. But instead of having lust magic, he has love magic. He's much more interested in happily ever afters than one night stands. And all of his kind work in sex clubs, and he ends up getting fired and he ends up getting tossed out of his legion because he hooks up soulmates. It's just his innate magic. The way that they're, most would stoke lust, he finds soulmates and pulls them together. And this is not a good thing from, the incubi perspective. So he gets tossed out with nothing. And is just trying to make a living. And so he becomes a cherub because, who else better to go around trying to get people. So here he is, a 7 foot tall incubus, and they make him wear a toga and it's really short on him. There's no pockets, like this poor guy, and he ends up getting magically lassoed, to talk about forced proximity, to the grumpiest Phoenix shifter in this world, who happens to be the equivalent of, he's a warden. He's basically their version of a detective, and he's on a case, and now they are lassoed together, and their arms are, and they cannot get undone no matter what they do. And he is like the noirest of noir detectives, kind of. He is, bitter, and there's no such thing as love. And so they are quite the pairing together. They have to go around and work his case together.
Sounds fun.
They are.
That sounds hysterical. Well, in my shifter series, I like non-traditional shifters. So if I've got a wolf, I pair him with a fox. And then his brother falls in love with a lynx, and that's kind of a mixed marriage because, canine feline. And so the inner wolf keeps referring to the lynx as the floofy one and making all these cat jokes. So, it's true love. It's a fated mates, but there are definitely some opposites attract there. And that was just fun to have the whole cat and a dog getting together. And then I've got a lonely lighthouse keeper who is a medium who falls in love with the ghost of someone who was murdered 70 years ago on the beach near his lighthouse. And they learn to navigate that despite corporeal differences, and figure out how to still have a good time. But they also learn how to, enjoy sitting on the couch and watching a movie together. And the ghost gains enough ability to be able to move game pieces so they can play board games. They can, they're learning how they can do things together when, one of them has some severe difficulties with not having a body. And gradually they get past it, and they even figure out how to have a pretty good time. But that was just a lot of fun because it presented some difficulties you don't usually have. So required some creativity and some humor.
It's almost like a disability as well in ways. And I think that's really fascinating that you could have a relationship even as a ghost that's could be almost treated like it's a handicap in like a medical kind of situation. So I really like that kind of dynamic where you can play with that in the world of shifters or in the world of creatures that you might not have a better opportunity.
Yeah, because he's still sentient and he has his personality and all of his memories in his mind. He just is missing a body. And, little thing like that. So they work through it. What are some of the things, were there books, movies, TV shows that made you fall in love with the idea of shifters and vampires and non-human creatures falling in love? Jeannie?
Oh my gosh, yes. My love affair with him probably started with the Saint Germain books by Chelsea Quinn Yarborough, and I loved all of those. And she was the first one that convinced me that it might be possible to like a vampire. Might be, maybe. I absolutely adore Nalini Singh's shifter books, Side Changeling books. I love the Kate Daniels series, which has both shifters and vampires, but vampires are kind of not very nice in those books. Yeah, I love your books. I'm going to be going to Amazon and buying things now because everybody's books sound great. So I really have a lot of favorites, but those are probably some of my top ones in terms of shifters. I love the shifters, so, and vampires.
Okay. Deb?
So I think I cut my teeth on with Anne Rice, I think like a lot of people. But I really liked the Deborah Harkness series. And I love that one of the gripes I often had with vampires was like, okay, you've been alive for 300, 400,000 years. And why are you falling in love with a high school girl? With zero experience, and what have you been doing, right? So I love that this guy, that her hero is a scientist, and he's working towards a goal to help his species and all that, and like has really done something with all that time. So that's one of my favorite. I remember that are they doing a series, Anne Rice series now? I think I heard it was on TV with Lasher, the spirit that haunts the family, the Witches of Mayfair or something like that. I love that series too. And I heard they just started a series. I think there's a new series on that. I've got to look that up because he was a ghost and he scared the crap out of me. But I love all sorts of different, I love, especially I like to escape in, at night before, when I'm done with work, I like to dive into TV before I go to bed. And I love to catch all those different fun series that are, all different creatures, and movies too.
Very good. Okay, Ginny?
Dracula starring Frank Langella. Okay. I don't remember how old I was.
This still my heart.
But I was old enough. And I was just like, who could say no to that? What woman would say no to that? Right. So, the whole thing at the end where she smiles beatifically because she's been saved. I'm like, she's thinking how to figure out how to get back. So that for me was like I hadn't read or seen a lot of paranormal before then. The only thing I'd seen was the picture of Nosferatu, which terrified me as a child. So like Nosferatu was lurking anytime I had to go out in the dark. But Frank Langella proves that no, they can be super sexy. And that really was the start for me. I still will go back to that if I need something. At the time, I loved Love at First Bite. It has not aged well. Don't keep your memories. Don't go back and watch it because it has not aged well at all. But I thought that, oh my gosh, George Hamilton as a vampire, it's only getting better, right? So when they finally filmed Interview with the Vampire, I was there because that had everything I needed in visual entertainment, good-looking leading men. I'm a simple creature. I'm not gonna lie. Reading wise, I didn't do a lot of it. I read horror, but I didn't really read a lot of most of the horror that I read, the vampires, the monsters, they're all scary, they're all evil. There's nothing romantic about it. So I only saw romantic, vampires or werewolves or whatever on movies or television. I mean, American Werewolf in London was not really a great romance. It was sad and very unattractive. And as clearly stated, I prefer attractive. So I didn't really read a lot about it until I was much, much older. So for me, the defining vampire moment, which we really cover for All the Undead, is Frank Frank, Be Still My Heart, which we said, Langella's Dracula.
How about you, Susan?
Lady Hawk, that
Oh,
was the
yeah.
first one where I kind of took a whole new look at what it meant to be shifting. Where if anybody, I'm sure most people know the story, Rutger Hauer, the knight who turns into a wolf in the evening and his lady love turns into a hawk at day because they're cursed. But the romance between them was one of the
30 for
most
30 seconds a day, right?
Oh my God, that 30 seconds where they both could stare at each other's eyes before they shift again. It was one of the most eye-opening, emotional stories I had ever seen. And I was like, that is what it means to be a romance writer and to deal with the supernatural at the same time. That kind of curse, that kind of magic. And you can take that in not just in terms of curses, but in terms of shifting in anything. It's basically being a dichotomy. And that dichotomy was really fascinating to me. And we just started playing. I started watching more. I got, I then sucked into Buffy and Angel and
No pun intended.
exactly. I did not mean to do a pun, but there it is. It just goes with the territory. But yeah, all that stuff kind of really excited in terms of a writer. Some of the concepts that you could play with, like age and in history, and so many of us are taking it just one step further. Alana Andrews, the Innkeeper series.
I love that series.
It's the magic shape, but the Innkeeper series completely blew me apart with werewolves. I was like, and the vampires, her vampire culture is one of the most fascinating. And again, that's another thing that we get to create all new cultures for these creatures that normally, it's not just a vampire. You have to explain why they are, who they are, why they're there, what was their past. They're not the only ones. How do they all get along? So this builds and builds and builds. And I love that concept of just bringing these cultures all the time. And there's so many good stories and great authors out there, and I can't wait to read all of them.
Cecilia.
I would say for me, my interest with the paranormal started with being obsessed with ghosts and mythology when I was younger. And of course, when you have mythology, you have all kinds of stories of, love between different kinds of supernatural beings and creatures, sometimes not consensual, which was not cool, but also, then there are curses, and then the legend of the Selkie, where it's, the fishermen steal the seal skin so that the woman has to stay with them. And so I guess mythology gave me an idea of, okay, what romantic love does not look like most of the time. And then, I get to be a teenager and hello, Interview with the Vampire. I mean, I don't care if that fright wig was horrible on Tom Cruise. Yes, let's give me the Tom Cruise, give me the Brad Pitt. Give me the, oh gosh, Armand, whoever played him.
Antonio Banderas.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think I saw that movie in the theater like 4 or 5 times. Yeah, which is like the only movie I've ever seen that much in the theater. So, and then I went on to read the rest of the books, which I think I stopped at some point when they just got way off the rails and I never made it over to Lasher. But yeah, and then I was trying to remember, I read so much when I was a kid and a teenager. I can't remember all of it, but yeah, a lot of it was in that vein, and also fantasy and sci-fi and some horror.
Okay. Meghan.
I think that before I started looking at creatures as romantic, I think I needed to see them as funny. So Love at First Bite was a huge favorite of mine as a kid. And Young Frankenstein, which still does stand up to time. I love that movie. And it made, it was and again, it was like, the question about what makes you human and this monster. And I always loved that. I was never a horror person, although I did read like some Stephen King and stuff. And I mean, he did ruin clowns for me. I'll give him that. And I will say that Anne Rice put the sexy in vampires. I was terrified of vampires as a kid. And she really did sort of change that mythos for me. It really was like, oh, wow. So, but I think that for me, it really started from the comic angle first, and then it moved to the more sexy. Yeah, so I think that I don't know that I have like a real defining one in terms of, I was trying to think with shifters and stuff. Lady Hawk was really good. I mean, you can't see that and not be affected by, yeah, like you said, that 30 seconds together, like that's wow, that's romance. But I don't know that I had one single thing that said this is it, this is what you're going to do. But an awful lot of things I think that came together, and maybe that's in some ways why we all started writing, because sometimes you see this and you love this, but you just wish that you had this, and so you start writing what you want to see out there. At least, I feel like I do. I feel like I've tried to write what I want to see out there.
100%.
Totally, yeah.
I think for me, it started with Dark Shadows. I mean, I was a preschooler, but Barnabas Collins and his tragic love affairs and this misunderstood vampire who wanted to be human again. That kind of set my whole tone with vampires. And it never really changed. Also Forever Night.
Oh, yeah.
Nicholas Knight, the ancient warrior falls in love with the coroner, and that was another one that was too short. And the 1980s TV series Beauty and the Beast.
I was just gonna say that one. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. All of those were ones that just, I was the right age to fall in love with them, and they just kind of set the tone from there on. Is there a creature you haven't worked with yet that you would like to, Jeannie?
Oh my. Well, I haven't written shifters yet, which I'd like to do. I love to read them, so I'd like to write them at some point. But also, I think Susan may have mentioned it, or Ginny, but Selkies. I'd like to use some Selkies at some point, because I think it's such a fascinating concept, because seals can be on land or on sea, and humans can be on land or on sea, and there's so much potential there for mischief and for danger and for romance. There's just a whole lot there, and just about any kind of shifters. I have loved your shifter series, Gail, because of some of the unusual pairings and some of the funny things that happen with that. And so yeah, I think I want to delve further. Not that I'll ever get away from the witches, because I probably won't, but.
Deb?
I would love, I've had some interesting, like I used a Spriggan, which I thought it was pronounced Spriggan, but apparently it's pronounced Spriggan. I used that in my witch book that's coming up soon. And I had fun with that as a secondary character, but I was thinking I would love to take a really misunderstood, baddie, like a banshee or something, and kind of turn her into a heroine. I would love to do that. something old world, like a Green Man or something like that. That would be really fun.
That does sound cool. Ginny?
Well, first of all, thank you, Deb, because I thought it was Spriggan too. Is it Spriggan?
It's who knew? Spriggan.
Nothing,
Yes.
nothing. So thank you. A little bit of knowledge, very helpful. Because of my Necropolis Enforcement Files series, where I have literally every undead known to mankind, literally involved. I don't have a lot, but when Jeannie said Selkies, I'm like, I really haven't done Selkies or mermaids. I haven't done. Thank you. See, now I'm feeling that's the anthology I'm feeling now. But yeah, so no, I'm kind of with Jeannie. That sounds. All the water-based ones I really haven't delved into, and I've delved into them from the Cthulhu mythos side of the house, but not from the fun paranormal side of the house. So I would like, yeah, mermaids, Selkies, all of the water, the water horses, which name I'm now forgetting, but I know I'm under any other circumstance, but when we're being recorded. But all of those things, I think that would be very cool to do. And yes, Jeannie, I really think we need the anthology.
I'm game.
Yeah.
How about you, Susan?
Lizards. I'm just saying it. It's stuck in my head now. I don't know what to do with it.
The lizards
It's
and the water
happening.
creatures anthology. Geez,
There are
Troy.
spicy dinosaur romances,
Oh,
so
there
why
are.
not?
Really?
Go for
Oh
it.
my God.
It's
Mad
happening
Maddox,
at
man.
the
Check her
Griffith
out.
household.
She's
Sounding
Lizards are
alarms.
coming.
We need the lizard anthology and the water creatures anthology.
There we
Come
go.
out like the double set.
Cecilia?
That's
Oh,
so
I'm sorry, go
funny.
back.
No. I'm done with the lizard. That's good. I'm gonna end on the lizard note. It was a high.
Cecilia?
Yeah, I was gonna say lizards too, but yeah, no, I think no, I've long wanted to do a Selkie romance of some sort. But have it be like a male Selkie, because they have to exist. But you never hear about them. So why not? Where are they? And who can fall in love with him, or who can he fall in love with? So yeah, the under the sea creatures. So yeah, I'm down for that anthology.
Anthologies have come up at
Yeah.
stranger situations
I
than
want
this.
to mention that
You might be surprised.
Under the
Megan?
Sea anthology really sounds like a great
Good
time.
times. Good times. Megan?
I've also written I feel like about every creature under the sun. I think I wouldn't mind writing a romance for a shade. I think that would be kind of cool. One thing I used to do, and I probably should have said this in the question before, is my brother was a big D&D player, and he and his friends would never let me play. But if it was just him, and he would try to, get me to play, and he'd get so mad at me because I would open, the monster manual. I'd be like, "Ooh, he's hot. Ooh, that creature's really," and it's like, no. And I was like, what, so I think I would probably want to, pick something. I've never written a true monster romance, even though I've written demons and other things. I have one, I guess, that's sort of coming up like that. He was a character that was a side character. He has 3 rows of teeth. He's a 8-foot tall red fury demon. And it never occurred to me that romance readers would want his story. And he's become like a fan favorite in this series. And everyone's like, when's he getting his romance? And I was like, are you serious?
He has lots of
And then
teeth.
suddenly monster romance is everywhere now. So I'm just like, wow, I guess this is the time to write it. So
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, the next one in my Shifter series, Fox Hollow, is going to be a moose and I think an ocelot. So we will get moose romance. For as much as I love vampires, I have never written a romantic vampire. I have written, the Vampire in My Deadly Curiosity series has sworn off humans because they just don't live long enough, and he's had his heart broken too many times. And so I've never really written a vampire romance, so that has to happen at some point here. Well, folks, we have blown through our time, so I want to go around real quick and have everybody tell us where we can find you online, and if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, tell us about that too. Jeannie?
Well, you can find me online at jeanneadams.com. You can find me here on Continual, and you can find me on most social media under Jeanne Adams. I'm usually on Instagram or Twitter, where I spend way too much time, more time than is good for me. My most recent release is in the anthology Midsummer Mischief at Canham Castle. I have a story in that, and then
Loved it.
Yay! I'm super excited to be able to say that I will have a story in Mercedes Lackey's latest Valdemar anthology come November. So I'm very excited.
Ooh, cool. Deb?
I have 2 releases coming up quickly. One is the 3rd in my Victorian mystery series. It's called Murder on the Mirrored Lake, but my paranormal is coming up in September. The first book in the Witches Ball series comes out at the end of August, and it's by Jane Charles, and it's a lovely group of authors, historical authors in this, Kate Pierce and Ava Stone and Renee Bernard and Jane Charles and Jerica Knight Catania and I'm going to forget somebody. But my book is called Moonsight Magic, and it comes out in September 25th. And like I said, it's my moon and water versus fire and and air magic.
Very cool. Jenny.
You can find me at my website, jennykoch.com. I'm all over Facebook. I'm also on the site formerly known as Twitter, now known by the brilliant moniker of X. We'll just let that sit there. I'm also on Pinterest. I have upcoming releases right now. They are all pre-releases, so come find me at DragonCon. I will have at least one and possibly 3 pre-release titles with me. They're so new, they're not even up on the publisher's website yet. But so I can't really say much about it other than come see me at DragonCon and get them early. But if this airs after that, they should be available, or I'll be talking about them on one of the new release panels. Yeah.
Very cool. Susan.
You can find us at clayandsusangriffith.com. You can find both of us at Clay and Susan, or just Susan Z. Griffith and Clay as Clay Griffith. We've got our old series and also some new stuff coming up soon, including The Monstrance, which is the New York magic series. And we've also just got a new story in Lou Anders' new Thrones and Bones series called From Tales from Stokey's Hall. So that is just being released, and we're happy to be a part of it.
Nice. And Cecilia.
Yes, as I pet my cat like a supervillain. So you can find me at my website, CeciliaDominic.com. That is CECILIA. And then you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Cecilia Dominic Author. I too will be at DragonCon. I'm also doing Multiverse this year. My most recent release was the Last Fae Files book back in the spring, but hey, it finishes the series. So if you are in the mood to binge a 6-book series with a slow burn romance between a Fae and Gargoyle, look for my Fae Files. And then, yes, I have a 3-book contract I'm working on right now for Falstaff, so nothing imminently, but hopefully early next year.
Great. Meghan?
You can find me on my website at www.meganmaslow.com. I'm all over Facebook. Again, Meghan Maslow. I'm also on Insta quite a bit. I'm now avoiding the former Twitter because I just can't deal. I haven't deactivated my account, but I'm very rarely there at this point. So it's easier to catch me on the other sites. And the latest is there is a Fated Mates charity anthology that's coming out September 1st. And my story is called As the Raven Flies. It is set in my Charm City Chronicle worlds, which is set in Baltimore. And it is a pairing of a raven shifter and a dire wolf who has pulled a Mr. Darcy and has basically let this very nice raven shifter know that even though he's just a bird, he will accept him as his mate, which does not go over very well. A funny story with this anthology, originally we were all supposed to write a maximum of 20K, and they ended up upping it to 30K because of some people who can't write short. And it's funny because then almost everybody went to 30K, so it became a much larger anthology than was originally anticipated. But it's got loads of great stories and wonderful authors in it, and it's raising money for 2 great causes. So, and again, it's September 1st that it's coming out. So yay for that. And then I have I can't actually really talk about it, but I have my very first holiday romance coming out, which is hysterical that I'm writing any kind of holiday romance, because it's just, I would just never have thought, but I got invited to do one, and it will be a paranormal. I can't say much more about it. It will definitely be comic. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbrice.com. I'm on all the social media, including the unfortunate X for now, under a variation of those names. So if you spell them right, you'll find me. My latest book actually just came out, and it's on pre-order right now. It'll be out August 23rd. It's Roustabout, and it's part of the Carnival of Mysteries multi-author shared world series. So I'm really excited about that. And please go check that out on Amazon. Check out all the books in that series because they're all going to be fantastic. So, well, folks, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more romance here on Continual. So we'll see you online.